Hey everybody, Nat Daddy here, and we got a special one for you today. We have Ed Brisson joining us today. So thanks, Ed, for joining us, and I'd like to welcome you to the channel. And again, I know just thanked you, but thank you again. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start talking about all your fine products?
Yeah, so I'm a comic book writer who currently live in the east coast of Canada in Halifax, but kind of lived all over Canada. I was born in Toronto, grew up in Oshawa, moved to Kelowna, Vancouver, now here. Uh, I've been writing comics I've been self-publishing comics since the 90s, but I've been paid by other people to make comics for about 15 years now. So I've worked at first with Image and Marvel and DC. I've worked with Oni, Dark Horse, currently working with Dynamite and Mad Cave or AWA.
Hmm.
So kind of worked with most of the publishers out there, and like I said, almost I guess I'm about 15, 20 years into this, and still keeping it going, which is great. It's a blessing. I love it. I love comics, so happy to just keep working.
Is there a character you haven't done yet that you wish you could?
Yeah, there's a few. I wrote a Punisher thing that was supposed to come out around the pandemic, and it was one of the victims of sort of all the books that were being canceled around the pandemic.
Sure.
And it remains about 80% complete as the 5 issue mini that I was doing with Declan Shalvey. It's probably one of my favorite things I've ever written, so it kills me that it's sitting on a shelf. So hopefully one day we'll see that. I've never had a chance to write Daredevil, which would be great.
Hmm.
But the one sort of brass ring character for me is I'm a huge Speedball fan,
Okay.
and I have an idea for like a Speedball mini I'd love to do at some point. It's come very close to happening. I've talked with Marvel about it in the past, but it's not quite happened. So that's like kind of the thing I would love to do is do a Speedball and sort of try and capture that excitement that I had for Speedball when he first debuted back in the 80s,
Sure.
when Marvel had sort of promised us that Speedball was going to be the next big thing. So that's the one thing. That's the thing I hope that before I sort of hang up my keyboard that I'll have a chance to do a Speedball miniseries.
Now, growing up in the 80s, and you probably were exposed to the Silverhawks and the Thunderhawks and that, or the Thundercats, I should say. Were you a big fan of them? And is it pretty mind blowing now that you get to write those series? I know you're doing the
Yeah,
spin off, but
yeah, I was a big Thundercats fan back in the day. It was, when I was, like a lot of kids in the 80s, I was a latchkey kid. So I'd come home from school and I would kind of have I had a brother and sister, but I was the oldest. So I kind of dominated the TV. And if I recall correctly, Silverhawks and Thundercats were part of that block after TV that was like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Silverhawks, and Thundercats. And so I watched, Silverhawks was only one season, but they, you know, did reruns, and so for as long as I can remember. But yeah, I was really big into both of those series. I was pretty excited when I got tapped to do Thundercats Lost. Silverhawks was the thing that I was kind of bugging Dynamite to let me write from the time that they announced this Thundercats book. That I'm friends with Declan Shalvey,
right.
who's writing that book. And when it was announced that he was doing a Thundercats book, I kind of kept started pestering him about the idea of Dynamite doing Silverhawks, and were there plans, etc. At that time, there weren't. I think even when I was offered Thundercats Lost, there wasn't any real plans to do a Silverhawks book. But when I was talking with them, I'd already pestered Declan a bunch, and so started pestering Nate Cosby, the editor, about the idea of doing Silverhawks. And within about a week of I think of me first getting Thundercats Lost as a gig, and me pestering him about Silverhawks. I think Nate made some calls and he made it happen, and so that's how we have the Silverhawks comic now.
That's pretty cool. Now, when you're making these things in advance like that, how far in advance do you get to know about your stories and that? Like, are you planning things already, like for crossovers and stuff like that between the two? Because they do share a same universe, correct? Thundercats and
So,
Silverhawks.
yeah, so it was like hinted at in the Thundercats relaunch that came out about so 12 or 13 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a little bit of a hint that that Monstar and the Tiger Sharks, which was the third cartoon they did, all share the same universe. Um, in terms of how far ahead we work, when I started on Silverhawks and when I started on Thundercats Lost, I planned for 10 issues. So before I started writing issue one of either book, I knew where we were going to be at issue 10. Uh, Planning beyond that is kind of tough because, it's a thing where you look at sales and see where they are and
Mm-hmm.
kind of get greenlit for more issues as you get closer to the end. Um, but I've had a bunch of conversations with Nate and a bunch with Nate and Declan, sorry, and we've been planning some stuff for 2026. So we're planning, more than a year out right now for some exciting stuff coming up. But I can't spoil what that stuff is,
For
but
sure.
it'll be very fun for fans of either or both.
Well, since we are talking about the Thundercats Lost and that, issue 4 does come out this week. I have not had a chance to read it yet because I was getting ready for this interview.
Yeah,
But
no problem.
why don't you give our audience here a little recap of the first 4 issues in case some people haven't been following it?
Sure. I think it's issue three that just came out.
Oh, is it?
Uh,
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I thought I was wrong. So we've just the first three issues, and the sort of scope of the book is that if anyone's following the mainline Thundercats book, the Thundercats had to leave Thundera because it was destroyed, and they found a new life on Third Earth. With the Thundercats Lost book, we sort of go back a few years, or a couple of years at least. And the idea is that that was kind of teased in the Chitara miniseries that Chitara had premonitions about the destruction of Thundera. And so the Thundercats Lost team was actually a earlier uh, convoy that was sent out. There was two ships sent out to try and establish some sort of settlement for the Thundercats to move to ahead of the destruction of Thundera. And so they're out. Uh, they land on a planet. They're immediately shot down and sort of beset upon by Captain Shiner and his forces,
Mm-hmm.
who have um, some sort of beef with cats. We find out that the world that they're on, that cats are kind of like a myth more than they are. Like they're like almost like Bigfoot or something. There's stories told them about them. There's this holy text written about them, but whether or not they're actually real or just this sort of these mythological creatures is sort of debated. Um, but those who do believe in them kind of see them as bad luck omens and things to be sort of squashed right away.
Mm-hmm.
So when they land on Third Earth, the two ships are separated. The one is shot down. That we follow Bengali, Pumera, uh, Lingso, Ligon, and Nico as they try to find the second ship and then try to track down the Book of Omens because they're transporting the Book of Omens, which is this sort of Thundercats holy text, Thunderen holy text that not only contains their entire collected history, but also is sort of this like living text that gives them a blueprint for moving forward and where they should settle and how they can establish a new uh, home for the Thundercats. And that is now lost and they don't know where it is. And so they're trying to find any surviving Thunderans and try and track down this book while the planet seems to be doing everything within its power to kill them. They're being hunted by Captain Shiner's men, led by this sort of unstoppable killer named Scorpius,
Mm-hmm.
who will become sort of this big bad as we go through these 10 issues. He's a kind of got a very interesting backstory that we haven't really touched upon, but going forward, we're going to start to see that he's someone who's been around for a very long time and has a very specific grudge against cats, and and is hoping to wipe out the Thundercats before they can kind of spread across the planet.
Yeah, it's been great. I've been enjoying it a lot.
Thank you.
Now, in this series, and you've done it in other series, with Marvel and DC and that as well, they're introducing new characters and stuff that haven't been around before. Now, when it comes to the creation of those characters, are they strictly all like your design, or do you take, they give you like starting points and you jump off from there and that? Like, how does that go?
No, that was the two new characters that we created, Ligon and Nico. Was strictly just Rafa and I.
Mm-hmm.
So we came up with concepts for the characters. Rafa did some designs. We had some back and forth. Um, we wanted to create characters that felt very much like they belonged in the Thundercats universe. That we wanted them to feel as though they could have been from the original series. Um, and so we were looking at actual sort of cats in the wild that hadn't really been already used, which is tough because a lot, Thundercats went through just about every sort of wild cat that you could.
Mm-hmm.
Ligon is he's large, he's giant, he's sort of the brute of the team, and he's half lion, half tiger, which are in the wild, or not in the wild, sorry, in zoos we have examples of both ligers and tigons. And a liger is a creature with a lion father and a tiger mother, whereas tigons are the opposite. And the interesting thing about them is that a liger with the father as a lion, mother as a tiger, neither of those pass down the sort of this growth inhibitor um, gene, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so ligers tend to be larger than lions or tigers. They grow huge. Whereas on the other side, tigons, which are tiger father, lion mother, uh, both have like they double up on the growth inhibitor, so they're actually tend to be smaller. So Ligon is a liger. He's much larger than all the other Thundercats. He's a real like sort of he's almost you know 50% taller, much
Yeah.
wider. Uh, he's 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 like a gentle giant. He's very kind, but like very protective of his Thundercats. And then on the other hand, we have Nico, who is a snow leopard. She's a bit smaller. She's more compact, but definitely is the sort of warrior on the team. She's not someone to really even mess with. Uh, she's very much bruises, very happy to get in a fight. She loves fighting, loves being in the middle of war. Is kind of a prick a lot of the times, but that's kind of her charm. I think. She's, you know, if this were the X-Men, she's kind of like the Wolverine on the team.
That's pretty cool. Now, jumping back a few years, you've had new characters show up when you did some stuff for Marvel. I know then Avengers of the Wasteland, they had that new character introduced there, Danielle Cage, for an
Mhm.
example. Is that something they say, we have a new character, this is what it is, and then you kind of create the backstory in that, or they come to you and you have to kind of fit it into the story, or?
That one, for the most part, the Avengers of the Wasteland. I think every character that was in there was a character that was already established as a character. So, but Danielle Cage, she wasn't Thor, like she becomes Thor
Right, right,
in
yeah.
the comic. That wasn't a thing from the original, but she was already established there. She was friends with Logan.
Hmm.
The character who takes over as Ant-Man was already in some of the older comics,
Hmm.
both the original Old Man Logan and thing. As a kid who had the Ant-Man helmet, Baby Banner was there as well, and I am blanking on who the other member was. Uh,
I can't remember either at the moment.
yeah, this was like 6 years ago that I wrote it.
That's okay.
But they were all characters who had been established. Uh, in some cases, they're status quo.
Okay.
I changed the status quo a little bit, but not. Uh, I didn't change it in a way that contradicted anything in the comic. It was more a case of like building upon what had already been established in the comics. Whenever I'm writing things for Marvel or whoever it is, I want to sort of build on what other writers have done before. I don't want to kind of rewrite things or
Sure. Retcon,
I
yeah.
want it to be that everything you read in the past matters.
What about, say, like those some of the characters that were showing up in your Batman Incorporated run? There was a couple of characters in there, which I believe were pretty like much brand new. Like, the
Yeah.
failed, yeah, the failed sidekick there. Like,
So all of those were brand new. Like all those are creations between John Sims and I.
mm-hmm.
Phantom One, the sidekick for Ghostmaker's old sidekick,
Yeah,
was someone we created.
yeah,
Clown Hunter, which was the current Ghostmaker sidekick, was someone who was established by James Tynion
right.
in the main Batman titles. Um, yeah, I think almost most of the Batman Incorporated characters were already existed. The only one that we created was Grey Wolf, which we did in the Batman annual.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but all of the all the there was three or four that we can come across who had been working with Blackness. That Blackness is a character that we created. The four sort of Batman Incorporated like characters were all created by Junkins and I. And then when we got the Joker Incorporated, all of his clowns around him were all fully created by John Sims and
Mm-hmm.
I. But those were all like the idea of doing Joker Incorporated was one that I had that I sort of brought to the editorial. I was kind of surprised hadn't been done already because it felt like an obvious choice.
Sure.
But yeah, they were in all those cases. It was John Sims and I sitting down and wanting to sort of introduce all these characters. It wasn't there wasn't any sort of mandate from DC to add in characters. They weren't. They were pretty open to just letting us do what we want. The only time I can think really where like Marvel or DC had sort of given a mandate for a new character was when I was writing Old Man Logan.
Right. That's gonna be my
Uh,
next question,
okay,
actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Crimson Scarlet Samurai. What we call it? The Scarlet Samurai was um, something that came from higher up,
Mm-hmm.
but it was not. And that was already as Mariko, who was already a character that folks are well aware of if they're fans of Wolverine. But that's the only time where they kind of came to me and said, "We have this idea for this character that we want to put in this Scarlet Samurai, and it's Mariko." And then everything else I think was on Mike Deodato and I, like the design and her reasons for becoming the Scarlet Samurai and that whole storyline. But it was just like they had an idea for a character, we put it in. But I think that is the only time I can really think of. That's the only time I can think of where Marvel or DC or any publisher had sort of like had an idea for a character and wanted us to carry it out.
It's pretty cool. How does it feel when you see things nowadays that are popping, like a lot of the Predator crossovers and stuff, knowing that you kind of had a hand in that? Because even when I told my son the other day, I said, "Oh, I finally got Ed Brisson on for an interview," and he goes, "Oh, the Predator guy." So that's a pretty big deal, you know. I mean, the Predator was around for a long time, and then you kind of made him super popular again. I mean, not just you. There've been more movies than that recently. You
Sure, yeah.
but I mean, definitely in comic book wise, if it wasn't for your couple of series there, they wouldn't be doing those hot crossovers like they are doing right now. So
Yeah, I think Prey, the movie Prey, definitely had a lot to do with it. But Predator, I grew up, growing up, I loved comic books and I loved horror films and I
mhm.
loved the Predator franchise. I was a staunch defender of Predator 2 for a long time.
I think
And
Predator 2 is the better one as well.
I wouldn't agree. I think the first one is probably, but the second one, when it came out, I thought I really liked it. I liked a lot of things they did, a lot of things they put in place. Looking at now, there are some some flaws with it for sure, but I think I think it's a pretty solid entry still. Uh, but yeah, I was a giant Predator fan, and so when Marvel got the license and asked me if I was interested, I was very interested. I already had like kind of a Predator story ready to go. Uh, I've talked about this a bit before, but when I was a young teenager in elementary school, uh, I used to write a lot of what would be called fan fiction now. Back then, there
Yeah.
wasn't really a thing for it.
It was
And I
just
wrote
called being a nerd.
yeah, so I wrote a ton of stories about, Michael and Jason and Freddy and Cujo. I was obsessed with Cujo. Um, but, after seeing Predator at the drive-in as a kid, I wrote a bunch of Predator sort of short stories in class. And one of those stories that I wrote is kind of like the germ for what became the Marvel thing I wrote. So it's like very loosely, there was a lot of changes and a lot of updates and stuff, but it very loosely based on this idea I had when I was, I think, 13, um, about somebody in the future being out there hunting predators rather than the opposite way around.
Hmm.
So yeah, I was very excited to be able to sort of go back to the idea and build it into something that could stand on its own, something I thought was interesting, something I thought pushed the franchise forward in interesting ways. I think one of the things about Predator is that we don't really have like a Ripley character like Aliens does, right? Like we
Sure.
don't have that sort of main through line character. So that when I pitched the idea of doing Predator, I wanted to establish with Theta this character who would be our through line through a bunch of stories, and we see everything from her point of view. But yeah, it was great. I really loved the experience of writing those. I think 15 issues in total over 3 series,
Hmm.
and hopefully there's more to come, but we'll see.
Are you reading the current Predator stuff that's going on right now? The crossovers with against Spider
I haven't
Man?
read
No?
the latest one. I'm really behind
Hmm.
on my reading right now. I for the last year up until March, I was working on a video game full time and also writing comics. At about the pace I was before the video game. Like I'm writing 2 or 3 issues a month. So all of my free time was just gone. And now that I'm off the game, uh, I've been trying to like just kind of clear out a backlog of work. So
Sure.
my comic reading, unfortunately, has suffered as a result.
Do you want to talk about that video game there for a second? Or what?
I
Yeah.
can't actually talk about it. I'm
Oh, okay.
NDA.
Okay.
I'm not allowed to say anything. It's still in development and it won't be out for a couple of years. But
Okay. But
yeah,
you were
it was a
writing
cool
the story
experience.
for it, or
Yeah, I was
yeah.
working doing narrative stuff and building a Bible and a history for it. But yeah, it was a cool experience. I've never worked in a video game before, and so I think I started at the end of 2023 and was on it up until March of this year.
That's pretty
And
cool. Well, we'll talk about that at a later date, hopefully.
sure, as soon as the game is announced, then I can talk about it.
Well, let's talk about something you can talk about. Let's talk about your new run on Silverhawks, which, you know what? Again, like you, I used to read and watch all that stuff as a kid too, but I never did see the cartoon as a kid. I don't know if it just didn't play in Winnipeg or if it just didn't, I didn't catch it in that same block or whatever, but I do remember it. So when you started this new series, I read the first couple of issues and then I actually went back and read the old Star stuff and did a review as that as well, just to get a little bit more familiar with it. I'm really liking it, and again too, like not having that great background into it, it's not like I can't follow it or anything. So again, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, I mean that was definitely part of the plan. Like Silverhawks. It feels funny to say that a thing that I had, I think, what is it, 68 episodes, 65, 68 episodes,
Hmm.
only ran for a season.
Right.
Because currently we're living the age of where a season is 8 to 10 episodes. But yeah, it was. I think it came out in '86, right? So we're almost at 40 years
Yeah.
since that series came out, and so going into writing this series, I knew we had to do it in a way that it was, you know, both new reader friendly, like someone who's not familiar with Silverhawk could hop on it and know what's going on, but also sort of, didn't forget about the people who were fans of the series back in the day. I think one of the things that made that a lot easier is the series when it came out in the 80s was very much like an adventure of the week, adventure of the day, I guess, because
Sure.
it aired 5 days a week. With like the status quo would kind of reset after every episode or after every storyline if it was 2 or 3 episodes. So the thing about that is that there wasn't like a ton of it was more focused on the action, more focused on the heist of the weekend. There wasn't a ton of character work that was done in the original series. Like, if you watch the original series, you don't even know what half the characters' real names are, right? We
Right.
just have their code names. And so we sort of took the opportunity to sort of step back and still using the original few episodes of the series as kind of our roadmap for what was going to happen action wise. We stepped back and took those moments to really sort of examine who the characters are, like where they started at, how they became Silverhawks, which I think really helps bring people, especially new readers, into that world and connect with the characters. Uh, we are so that's largely the first 4 or 5 issues, sorry, that we're doing. We're also doing some things that they didn't do in the cartoon. In the cartoon, there is often mention of how Stargazer is the one who put Monstar in prison,
Mm-hmm.
150 years previous. So in the comic, we kind of touch on that a little bit, and actually, issue 5 of the comic is that story. Issue 5 is like a Stargazer sort of solo story with Stargazer and the original Silverhawks when they take Monstar down the first time, 150 years before our story takes place. Um, but the other thing that we want to take from that is we have this idea that there was a Silverhawks program before the current Silverhawks program.
Right.
And so we've brought in these kind of like pulled out of retirement Silverhawks to play sort of these mentors to the new Silverhawks, which I think is a lot of fun. I really enjoy writing these old Silverhawks and sort of getting into their stories a little bit. But yeah, so that really the idea was to spend the first 5 issues, 4 issues, sort of establishing who the Silverhawks were, taking our time, bringing them together as a team, and then, like I said, 5 is sort of a delve into the past with the OG Silverhawks and Stargazer and the Battle of Monstar, and then the next arc is going to be a 6 issue, sort of six, yes, 6, 7, 8, 9, 5 issues, sorry, storyline where we have kind of their big first deadly mission where sort of the fate of Limbo, depends upon them. And it's sort of this uh, war that we've kind of been teasing a little bit in the first few issues, where uh, the reason that Monstar is broken out of prison is that there's someone who's going to challenge his place as sort of the king mob boss of the
Oh,
universe, and he's
that's
out
cool.
of prison to deal with it. And that's going to be our big sort of event for the next 5 issues. So issue
And
6.
and is that a brand new character?
Also a brand new character, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So
That's neat.
yeah, you don't get to see them until issue 6 or 7, I
That's
believe.
awesome. You're one of the lucky people who get to have the amazing Mark Spears doing hot covers for your Silverhawks books there. Uh, do you get to know that in advance? Do you get to do any input on the for the cover
So,
work or
sometimes we've had conversations where Nate asked for suggestions on cover artists for the book. He has there are characters that are creators, sorry, that he likes working with, and kind of like his stable of cover artists. Like Mark is, one that has been doing a lot of Dynamite stuff. Obviously Jay Lee's always doing a lot of Dynamite stuff. I I know I had suggested a few. James Stocco is an artist who I love, who
yeah?
I sort of suggested as someone who would be perfect for doing Silverhawk, yeah, Silverhawk covers. Um, so yeah, but like I think Dynamite has sort of their variant cover program pretty well locked.
Sure.
I'll throw in some names here and there, but they know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's been great. I've been happy with those covers as well. And let's talk about you have a new project coming out fairly soon here. Do you want to give us a little taste about that? Wild Animals.
Yeah, so I'm doing a new crime series for Mad Cave. It's called Wild Animals, and uh, for anyone who's kind of followed my career for any period of time knows that I love writing crime and straight crime, like the straight crime, not like mixing genres. I love just doing straight crime when I have the opportunity. And I pitched this idea to Mad Cave a little while ago. Um, that we'll see where it goes, but the hope is that we'll do more than just this first arc, and they would all be self-contained crime stories that are all set in the same uh, town of Albion Flats. So
Hmm.
we'll have a lot of the same landscape, and some characters will walk by, kind of, as you see happen in like 100 um, Stray Bullets. Sorry, just talking about 100 Bullets and Stray Bullets and so on. But in Stray Bullets, in Sin City, you see those kind of characters that
Sure.
pass by and they become major characters later on. This first arc, which is called Five Funerals for My Father, is it kicks off with this I call him a kid, but he's 20, named Neil, who his life is kind of just shit. His mom's on her deathbed. Uh, Without her, sort of, she's in the hospital. The hospital bills, uh, because of the hospital bills, he can't even afford to keep the apartment that they've been living in for the last 15 years. So he's basically living out of his car. Uh, and one of the things that he pins is like, kind of like the downfall of her health and the turning point in their life where things went south was when his dad, who was a police officer, was killed by three other cops. Uh, his dad was trying to expose the three other cops for some nasty biz that they were involved with. They end up killing him during the process. Neil actually is scarred because they break into his house to do it, and it's during dinner time, and he ends up getting hot oil that scars half of his body. So he's like has this visual for like the worst day of his life, right? For where everything went wrong. And this story sort of plays out where he's just constantly, getting kicked. He's not you know, he's kind of a pushover, I guess. And it all comes to a head when a group of kids, he works at a gas station, and a group of kids keep coming in and stealing beer. Anytime he tries to stop them, they end up kicking the shit out of him. He's being beaten up by kids. And after something happens with his mom, he's just kind of like backed into a corner. So he starts fighting back, and this all sort of results with him discovering some secrets about his own family that give him the information about the three cops who killed his father that he never had. And so he decides he has a plan to go back to the town where this happened, to find these cops and sort of bring them to justice, because they were never charged for killing his father. Nothing ever happened to them for this thing that they did. So he decides to kind of try and make right the wrong that happened to him, and with the hope, obviously, that this somehow will turn his life around. And so it's a revenge story where he goes back to his old town and tries to take on three. One's still a police officer. The two are former cops at this point.
Yeah, and he's got nothing left to lose. He's already lost everything already. This kid.
Yeah,
So
he's
yeah,
living out of his car, and
yeah.
he's got like a couple $100 in his pocket, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah. I was lucky enough that you sent me a copy of that to read. I do thank you for that. And yeah, it was great. I knew kind of a little bit about it because I had read a synopsis of it beforehand. And yeah, awesome. Enjoyed the artwork. Story's great. I think a lot of people could relate to it because a lot of people, especially nowadays, political climate and social
Yeah,
economy wise. A lot of people can relate to it. A lot of stuff. It's like, oh, we're here to help you, but in the end, it's just they're there to take their cut and leave you with whatever's behind. And this kid kind of snaps. He kind of reaches
yeah.
his limit, kind of snaps. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Mad Cave's been putting out some amazing books lately, and that. So like you said, maybe you'll get your own little imprint in there of Brisson
I don't know that
crimes or whatever. Right?
but if we can keep it going, that would be great.
Yeah,
It's hard, it's a tough climate right now for comics in general. But yeah, we'll see how this first arc goes. I'm doing my best to get out there and sort of push it and make people aware of it.
sure.
And working with Andy Kuhn, who's on art, has been great. Deacon, who was on colors, has just been an absolute treasure on this book.
Now, talking about getting out and spreading the word on this, are you doing any kind of convention stuff coming up? Are you trying to stay out of the States a little bit just because of
So
no political stuff or work
yeah,
wise? Or
so I did. I was supposed to do a couple shows in the States this year, but unfortunately, I did pull out of those shows. I'm not going to be traveling to the States
Mhm.
until things have kind of settled. The issue at the border has got me a little bit concerned.
Sure.
I know that like we hear stories about people being detained, people being held, people being turned back. One of the things that kind of is glossed over or maybe not really highlighted in those stories is that if that happens to you, generally you're not only turned around or you know whatever detained, you can also receive a ban from entering the United States,
Right.
and that can last for several years or it can last for life. However, it depends on the mood of the person you're dealing with that day, and that is kind of what is holding me back from going to the States right now because I don't want to have everything going on politically at the moment, you know, impact my ability to travel to the States a year or 2 years or 3 years from now. So it's better. It makes sense for me to just sit tight
Sure.
and see what's going on.
No, again,
Um,
a lot of artists, not just comic artists, but just people, artist wise in general, are the same way too. Because you cross the border, you never know what they're gonna flip through and look through and use that against you. And
yeah,
like you said, just because you're a creative person, they tend to frown upon that nowadays down there. So
yeah, it's a frustrating time. I hate it because I love going to, I was really
sure,
excited about the two shows I was going to.
yeah.
But
And it's not the American people either.
no, no,
They
no.
all love Canadians as well too. It's just like you said, the people running the government at the moment. So, but
It's
that
just
leads us to one of the nice things is there's so many great Canadian cons and that coming up, and I'm sure you must be doing quite a few of those.
yeah. So I am. I'm going to be in Moncton. Not Let me bring up my calendar so I can actually give you dates rather than just.
Sure,
Uh,
it only
so
benefits you.
I'm going to be in Moncton for ECCE,
Okay.
which is kind of a localist show for me. And Moncton's a couple hours from Halifax, and I've been doing that show since I moved here in 2018. That is June 13th and 14th.
So that's next weekend.
Uh, yeah, next weekend,
Yeah.
and then I'll be in Montreal for the Montreal Comic Con from Friday, July 4th until July 6th. So it's a weekend convention. I'm going to be, looking at my calendar here. I'm going to be in Ottawa September 5th through 7th for the Ottawa Comic Con.
Hmm.
I'll be at a convention in St. John, New Brunswick from the 27th and 28th of September. And then I'll be in your neck of the woods in Winnipeg for
Yep.
the Winnipeg Comic Con on October 25th and 26th.
Yep, that's always a good one, being around Halloween. So I look forward to having you here. I'll make sure you're taken care of.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show and talking about all your great stuff here. We will definitely touch base again with you a little bit more in the future with some
Perfect.
more projects and stuff. And again, definitely when you're in town for Comic Con. Do you want to say anything else before we sign off? Maybe where people can find your amazing work and all that as well?
Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter at just at Ed Brisson. I'm on Instagram as at Ed underscore Brisson. some other Ed Brisson beat me to the username by about 2 weeks and has only posted once in 15 years.
Oh God.
And on Blue Sky, let me get the name because it's a little bit longer. Um, on Blue Sky, I am. I'll find it here. I'm at edbrisson.bsky.social.
Awesome. That is great. Well, once again, thank you for coming on and talking about your great books. Like I said, there are quite a few on the shelves almost weekly now between the Thundercats Lost and the Silverhawks one, and another couple weeks, the Wild Animals. So,
Yeah,
and if not that, look for some of your great back stuff. Because again, was familiar with your work, but when I started looking to see what actually was there, I was quite surprised at a lot of books I hadn't realized you had written that I quite enjoyed. So it's it's
perfect.
it's
Love to
always
hear it.
that's one of the reasons I do this show to bring attention to stuff. So
All right, man. Well, thank
awesome.
you very much.
All right, everybody. We'll see you guys all later. Thanks for watching. Take care.